Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're journeying back to the dawn of armored warfare to explore a machine that, while often overshadowed by its European counterparts, played a pivotal role in American military history. This is the story of the M1917 Light tank. Picture this, it's 1917, World War I is raging across Europe, and the battlefield is a brutal stalemate of trenches, machine guns, and barbed wire. A new invention, the tank, is starting to change the calculus of war. The United States, having just entered the conflict, looked at the successful French Renault FT and saw the future. Lacking a domestic design, the US decided to build its own version. The result was the M1917, America's very first mass-produced tank. At first glance, the M1917 looks almost identical to the Renault FT. It's a small two-man vehicle with that classic rhomboid shape. It features a fully rotating turret, a revolutionary concept at the time, which allowed the tank to engage targets in any direction without having to turn its entire hull. This was a massive leap forward from the British heavy tanks with their fixed-side sponsons. Let's climb inside. Figuratively, of course. It was a tight squeeze. The driver sat at the very front, peering through a small vision slit. Behind him, separated by a thin bulkhead, was the commander, who also doubled as the gunner. He stood or sat on a small strap, manually traversing the cast steel turret and aiming the main weapon. It was cramped, noisy, and incredibly hot inside, with the engine roaring away right behind the crew compartment. The M1917 weighed about 6.5 tons. Its armor was just thick enough to stop small arms fire and shrapnel ranging from 6 to 15 millimeters. It certainly wasn't designed to go head-to-head with artillery. Under the hood, or rather, in the rear compartment, was a Buda four-cylinder engine, churning out a modest 42 horsepower. This gave the tank a top speed of about 5.5 miles per hour on a good road, and a much slower crawl across the churned-up mud of no man's land. While that sounds painfully slow today, for its time, it was faster than a walking soldier and, more importantly, it was protected. There were two main variants of the M1917. The first was armed with a 37mm M1916 cannon, a small but effective weapon for knocking out machine gun nests and enemy strike points. The second version, intended for infantry support, swapped the cannon for a .30 caliber M1917 Marlin machine gun. The idea was to have a mix of these tanks working together. The cannon tanks would deal with harder targets, while the machine gun tanks would suppress enemy infantry. The suspension was simple but rugged, designed to navigate the craters and trenches of the Western Front. The wide tracks helped distribute the weight, preventing it from getting bogged down too easily. Everything about the M1917 was designed for one purpose: to break the deadlock of trench warfare and support the infantry as they advanced. It was a tool built to cross no man's land and bring the fight directly to the enemy. So, with this new machine ready for action, the American Expeditionary Forces were eager to deploy it. Production began in late 1918 with thousands of units ordered. However, history had other plans. The complexities of setting up a new production line meant that by the time the M1917s started rolling off the assembly lines in significant numbers, the armistice had been signed. The Great War was over. Not a single American-built M1917 saw combat in World War I. American tank crews in France actually used the French-supplied Renault FTs instead. It's a fascinating what-if of history. Had the war continued into 1919, as many expected, the M1917 would have been the spearhead of American armored assaults. But the story doesn't end there. Just because it missed the big show didn't mean the M1917 was useless. In the years following World War I, it became the backbone of the fledgling U.S. Army Tank Corps for an entire generation of American tankers, including a young officer named Dwight D. Eisenhower and another named George S. Patton. The M1917 was their first experience with armored vehicles. They trained with it, developed tactics for it, and wrote the very first doctrines for American armored warfare based on its capabilities and limitations. Patton, in particular, was a huge proponent of the tank. He saw its potential beyond just infantry support. He envisioned independent tank units that could strike deep behind enemy lines. While the slow and lightly armed M1917 wasn't the ideal vehicle for this role, the lessons learned from operating it were invaluable. These interwar years were a crucial learning period. And the M1917 was the classroom. The tank's service wasn't just confined to training exercises. While it never fought in a major war, it was used to maintain civil order. During the violent mine wars in West Virginia and various urban riots in the 1920s, the M1917 was deployed to intimidate crowds and restore peace. Seeing one of these steel beasts clattering down a city street was a powerful psychological tool. By the 1930s, tank technology had moved on. The M1917, with its slow speed and thin armor, was hopelessly obsolete. Newer, faster designs were emerging, and the M1917s were gradually phased out of frontline service. Many were scrapped, while some were used for target practice. A few were sold to Canada for training purposes at the start of World War II, but by then they were little more than museum pieces. Today, only a handful of M1917s survive in museums around the world. including at the National Armor and Cavalry Museum at Fort Benning, Georgia. They stand as silent testaments to America's first foray into tank production. While it never fired a shot in the war it was built for, the M1917's legacy is undeniable. It was the training wheel for the U.S. Army's armored forces. It was the machine that taught a generation of soldiers, including future legends like Patton and Eisenhower, the fundamentals of tank warfare, the lessons learned from its cramped interior, its slow engine, and its revolutionary rotating turret directly influenced the design of the tanks that would follow, from the M2 Light tank of the 1930s all the way to the mighty M4 Sherman that helped win World War II. The M1917 was the crucial first step, a humble beginning for what would become the most powerful armored force in the world. So, the next time you see footage of American tanks in action, remember the little M1917. It may have been late to the party, but it laid the foundation for everything that came after. It's a true pioneer of American military history. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the M1917 Light tank. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about military history, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the M1917 Light tank. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about military history, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. We'll see you in the next one.